To the start. I am your host, Pamela Bonkiu. Thank you ever so much for your patience and for always being fair and understanding. So we already began the show, and a mistake on our part. We were streaming on a different page, unfortunately, but our guest has been very kind, and he's still waiting to participate because these discussions need to be had, and it's very important that we have them. So we're so grateful. So the conversation today is very much about the Cameroon Anglophone crisis, and of course, our guest stars role as a key actor in resolving this. So we've heard from secessionists, we've heard from those who are in-betweeners, and we've heard from downright extreme ideologues, but it is about time we heard from a federalist. Our guest needs no introduction, but we need to know him. He has extensive experience in political affairs, in academia, human rights, and management. And for over 2 decades now, he's been working with the United Nations, leading human rights field operations to Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, and overseeing political affairs as well in the stabilization mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So he has pretty much been at the forefront of the Anglophone fight for over 3 decades, advocating for constitutional changes to address Anglophone marginalization in and by French Cameroon. So let us welcome everyone, Dr. Simon Munzu. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Munzu, despite your busy schedule, and we appreciate your gesture extremely. And thank you too for your patience, because you've done this already, and you are doing it again to ensure that our audience get this. So we can already see the comments coming through. Thank you so much, our audience, for being patient. So Dr. Munzu, I'll just go straight to the point. So let's start from the beginning. You were born in Guti, a village in the southwest region, and we just want our audience to understand what it was like growing up there. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Pamela, thank you for having me on the show. I heard a lot about Daily TV, and I know that you have a very good rating, that you have a huge followership, more than 24,000. So to me, it's a privilege to have received this invitation to join me on the platform tonight or this afternoon. And please don't worry about the time. I will give any time required to interact with my fellow Cameroonians on these issues. Coming to Nguti, yes, I mean, I was born in Nguti. In fact, a long time ago. As a matter of fact, let me just say that by God's grace, in a few weeks' time, in October 13th, I will be 70. So I was born in Nguti 70 years ago, And the Nguti of my childhood was a rural community where everyone lived very close to the earth. You ate what came from your farm. You ate the fish that you caught from the river yourself. You drank the palm wine that you tapped yourself.
Yeah.
And you played around in the compound with other kids. You ran around until you were old enough to go to primary school, and when you did, again, all your life centered around school. So I attended primary school in Guti prior to moving on to Sase, and it was a very great life. The Guti of those days is very different from what we see now, which is practically a semi-urban setting in Guti today. Very different from what the Guti of my childhood.
Yeah. So, well, that's interesting to know, because I don't know much about Guti, and maybe some of the audience people wouldn't as well. So it's interesting to know how growing up in those days were. And more and more villages are becoming like, semi-urban towns.
Yeah.
So the village, like we know, it is not the same. So we've already talked about your growing up, and personally, we've established that you're married and you've got 4 children and 7 grandchildren and an 8th on the way. Congratulations.
That's correct, yes. my wife and I have been very lucky that, yes, four children, two men and 2 women, have made us proud parents of 7 and soon to be 8 grandchildren. We thank God for that, yes.
Oh, wow, that's really amazing. The family's growing wide, and we'll have more Munzus in the way to advocate for us. So let's talk about your education, which reads very much like a brilliant essay. So you did so well in your GC ordinary levels, and so you earned a scholarship to go to the Cameroon College of Arts, Science and Technology, Cas Bambili, which at the time was a behemoth institution, you know. And so from the stories I hear, and from earlier generations, maybe your generation, compared to what we've seen now, Cas Bambili seems very much to be a shadow of itself. So what do you think happened that resulted in this drastic fall?
Uh, yeah, you're right. You're right to say that caste Bambili today, it's nothing compared to caste Bambili that we knew. But to understand that, you must remember that whereas today caste Bambili is treated like an ordinary secondary school,
Mm-hmm.
a lycée. In our time, caste Bambili was seen as an intermediary institution between secondary school and university.
Mm-hmm.
And we, the students, were very conscious of that. And even though the education there led only to obtaining the A levels,
Yeah.
but in the way we were treated and the way we carried ourselves, our aspirations, the ambitions, set us more closer to people with a university perspective than a secondary school perspective. And we carried ourselves accordingly, including the way we dressed. We would go to school in suits, voluntarily, because there was no uniform. There was no uniform in caste family of our time. So if those who had money and they were able to afford suits went to class in suits. Social life was good. We had many clubs on campus, SO club, executive club, and so on. And the life between boys and girls was, as you would expect, in a co-educational institution of that kind. So it felt very good to be in Cas Bambili. We had a student government, including a senate, of which I had the privilege in my second year to be Speaker of the Senate. So again, I mean, it was a crucible for many things, not just academic work, but it trained you for many things, including what path you later on took in life. So, yeah.
And so, whilst at Cas Bambili, apart from being, part of the Senate, you performed also extremely well, and this earned you a government scholarship to go study in the UK, where you then studied at the University of London. You got your first degree and your master's in law, and you then proceeded to do a PhD or a doctorate at the University of Cambridge. So, from 1973, you were registered to the bar in England. And we were discussing earlier about multi-jurisdiction practice. And so, and you were hoping that you were explaining the difference between being a barrister in the UK and, the possibilities of practicing law without fulfilling certain obligations. So, can you enlighten us a bit more on that?
No, I have to say that, in fact, when I arrived in England in January, in fact, 27th of January, 1971, after having left Cas Bambili in June 1970, it was to read for the bar exam. So I came straight to read to prepare for the bar. And so I was called to the bar in England in 1973. But and I could have gone back to Cameroon immediately and joined the Cameroon bar and practiced. But I have to say that during my course of study for those 3 years for the bar, my interest in legal studies was more and more academic. So I didn't want to just do 3 years of law, go and start practicing, and that's the end of legal studies. Although you may end up making a lot of money as a barrister. I was more interested in studies, so I opted to stay on. And for that, I had done the bar through the Inns of Court School of Law. I called to the bar by what they call the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple. But now for academic orientation to law, I went to the University of London, where I obtained as you mentioned, the bachelor's and the master's degrees in law. But again, in the course of those 5 years that it took to get those 2 degrees, I developed an interest in moving even further, and that's why I stayed on to do a PhD at the University of Cambridge, and thank God I obtained it in 1981. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Cameroon has a bar association, and I was just trying to understand if that bar association was only for common law lawyers, or it was a national one that also included those who practice law in the Francophone regions as well.
The Cameroon Bar Association that we have today is a national bar association, so it brings together both common law lawyers and civil law lawyers. But it has to be noted that initially, it is in West Cameroon that there was a West Cameroon Bar Association at the time when there was no bar association in East Cameroon. The lawyers in East Cameroon practiced without organizing themselves into a bar association. By contrast, those in West Cameroon did. But I think after the federation was abolished, the authorities in Yaoundé felt that what the West Cameroonians had as a bar association was a good thing. And so they decided that Cameroonians should organize themselves, but this time as a national bar, since there was no East Cameroon and West Cameroon anymore. Since then, since 1972, I believe, there's been a national bar headed sometimes by an Anglophone, sometimes by a Francophone. But history records that the very first president of the Unified Cameroon Bar Association was from West Cameroon, with a common law lawyer, the famous Chief Gojidinga. Yeah.
Oh, bless him. So in Cameroon, we have a system called the bijural system. So the Anglophone system is very much common law. But can you explain the difference between our system and the Francophone system? Because even though Anglophones very much would advocate for their system, people don't understand the differences.
Well, I mean, today I have to say, Pamela, that today it'd be very difficult to say upfront what the difference is between the common law system and the civil law system. In those days, one of the hallmarks of the common law used to be that the common law was largely unwritten. You know, it derived from decisions handed down by judges as each case came before them. And because it was an essentially judge-made law, the principle of what lawyers call binding precedent was very important, because what that meant was that if a particular conduct had been considered and decided once by a judge, a bench of judges, now in one case, if similar conduct came up before another judge, especially of the same level, examining the same kind of issue, then in the second case, the judges try to follow what the earlier judges had done in the earlier case, you know, sometimes even the same judge in the earlier case. And that's how the body of law was built. By contrast, in the civil law system, again, historically, there was more emphasis on written law. The law was codified. And the major difference then was that if in the common law system, it was difficult for someone to be told that you go away, you've come to claim this right, but we can't grant it to you because there is no law that says that you have that right. You understand? The judges examined the matter on the merits, and they felt that you deserved reparation about the other. By contrast, in the civil law system, they will say, well, there is no article of the civil code which says that you are entitled to a remedy for what you're complaining about, and then you are left without a remedy.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, the common law was accompanied, as it were, by a set of other rules and considerations in what we call the law of equity, you know, to which judges referred in order, for example, to mitigate the rigors of the law. If the law was found to be too severe, too imbalanced, and all of that, relying on the principles of equity, judges found ways of adjusting the situation. So it was very much a legal system that was geared very much towards ensuring justice between the parties as opposed to just legality. I have to say, though, that over the years, even in England, the law has come to be with things being more sophisticated and more complicated and all of that. In many areas, the law has come to be codified more and more. So these days, the lines between common law and civil law as such are blurred. However, in Cameroon, it remains important, though, because as long as we didn't have a common code of law in the country, the principles governing things like marriage, succession, your establishment of your will, and so on, in the French side, were handled as per the provisions of their civil code. We don't have the civil code, and therefore, when it comes to the same issues in our part of the country, those issues have to be decided following the common law. And that's why, while that remains the reality, any attempt to wipe out the common law by pretending that we are harmonizing the two systems becomes very offensive to common law lawyers, because it's tantamount to one system trying to wipe the other out, and that is, of course, unacceptable.
Yeah, certainly. So there was a controversy last year regarding bar exams where 500 students failed the exams, and people advanced three main reasons why. People had different opinions about it, but there are three general reasons why this was the case. So reviewers were blamed for being too strict. Others advanced that the rate was due to the applicant's poor level of mastery of the subjects. And some candidates actually raised that during the exams, they were subjected to the test of general culture on nation, culture, and identity at the opening of the examination on the 17th of February 2018, which most of them did not master, so they weren't prepared for. So what do you think could have been done to, or what improvements can be made to avoid these kinds of situations? Because the 2 years prior to that, 2 years in a row, all the students passed the exams.
Yeah, well, again, it's a matter of us trying to force harmonization. We have to be truthful to ourselves as a nation and understand that as of now, we still have two legal systems with two bodies of law, but also two different methods of applying law. In other words, the issues of procedure and evidence and so on, they are different. The way they're done in the common law jurisdiction is different from the way they're done in the civil law jurisdiction. And so if you're going to set an exam, it's not enough for examiners of civil law culture to set the questions inspired by their culture and then simply content themselves with translating, literal translation based of language from French into English, and they say they have set the same exam in English. No. If you want to set that same exam in English, you have to proceed from the basis of the English culture, legal culture. So if the subject matter is essentially French law inspired, and you're asking English law inspired students to answer that same question, you see already you're proceeding on a very false basis, and you're setting the students up to fail. Whereas in fact, they may be very brilliant and capable students from the common law perspective. So these are some of the things, and that call for honesty in recognizing these differences and acting accordingly. And it's a pity that without paying enough attention to this reality and dealing with it, we then create situations where people have to react after the event by way of protest, demonstration, and so on. I mean, it's regrettable. So we just have to keep reminding them that we have two different systems.
Definitely. So let's move on to a key element of this sit down. And it starts very much in the 90s, and you being a key actor, you've been at the forefront of this. So the 90s was when we saw the introduction of multi-party politics in Cameroon, and so this re-energized Anglophones to return to start advocating for a return to the federal state as they knew it. So Anglophone frustrations eventually led to the creation of the Social Democratic Front Party, as you know, which was launched in Cameroon on the 26th of May 1990. And some Anglophone students were so happy about this new change that was going across the country that they marched in support of the party and the liberalization of the political space. But unfortunately, they were arrested and falsely accused by the regime for advocating reintegration into Nigeria, singing the Nigerian anthem, and also raising the Nigerian flag. They were called Biafrans, enemies of the house, that sort of thing. And there was even a minister at the time, the Minister of Territorial Administration, Ibrahim Bombajoya, who said that if they were unhappy with the military state, they could go elsewhere. So most people do not know that at this time in the 90s, John Fonchar, a key architect of the federal system, was the first vice president of CPM and he was still in position. So he was outraged by the response of his party to this behavior and he decided to resign from his position and he explained his decision thus. So I'll read this quote. The Anglophone Cameroonians which were brought into the Union have been ridiculed and referred to as les Biafra, les ennemis dans la maison, les traîtres, and the constitutional provisions which protected the Anglophone minority have been suppressed, their voices drowned, while the rule of the gun replaced the dialogue which the Anglophones cherish very much. Now, this statement pretty much sums up the cause of the current Anglophone crisis, don't you think?
Yeah, yes, of course. I mean, I'm aware of that particular letter of resignation of Dr. John Fonchar. But let me tell you, Pamela, that that was just one of a long series of acts of protest by, if you like, Anglophone Cameroonians against what Anglophone Cameroon and Anglophone Cameroonians were undergoing in the Republic. Starting almost from the very next day after unification. Because if you take into account the writings of the likes of the late Dr. Bernard Fonglong, if you take into account even the memo that the KNDP, which was the ruling party in West Cameroon, governing the federation as a partner of Ahidjo's UC, they actually signed a governance pact. People should not forget that, or tend to forget that in the midst of this crisis, when we try to deform the facts of history. Now, there was a pact between the two to run the federation, and the KNDP is on record already at around 1964-65 of writing, addressing a memo to Ahidjo to protest about the way in which Ahidjo was approaching the management of the federation. And you had several civil society organizations, the emergence of the Cameroon Anglophone movement, the Free West Cameroon movement, and so on. So prior to getting to Mr. Fonchar's letter of resignation, there had been a long series of letters, memos, newspaper articles complaining about the fact that we, Anglophones, were being dominated, marginalized, assimilated in the federation, and that was even long before 1972. And of course, this intensified after 1972 with the abolition of the federation. So what I'm saying basically is that it came as no surprise that Fonchar wrote that particular correspondence. What is important in my mind is what response did his correspondence get? As you mentioned, the Minister of Territorial Administration of the time, the present Sultan of Bamun, His Royal Highness Bombon Joya, took that high-handed, dismissive attitude. Okay, he was not the first, and practically all other ministers, as we see even in the present crisis, have tended to take the same attitude, including Anglophone ministers. Like there is no problem. There's no problem. Whereas we all know that there is a problem. So I don't know exactly where you wanted us to take this, but all I can say is that yes, I'm aware of that letter, but that it was just the one in a series of long acts of protest coming from students, coming from our poets, coming from our playwrights. I can cite you poets and playwrights and commentators who, each person in their own field, took one theme or another of Anglophone marginalization and treated it, right up to the point where we convened the All Anglophone Conference in 1993.
Yes. So coming to that All Anglophone Conference in 1993, I believe that came on the back of after the SDF was launched And then they started campaigning. They were using ghost town tactics to do civil disobedience. That too was quite big in the 90s. So Biya was elected as president in 1992. He won again re-election as the president. And so he called the conference, the tripartite conference, which would take place, supposed to take place from the 30th of October to the 18th of November 1992, or was it 93 if I'm not mistaken? And yeah, so it was when discussions at that conference told, or the Anglophones' grievances weren't adequately addressed, that I suppose a committee was created, and you were one of the 4 Anglophones that made up part of that technical committee that was headed by Professor Joseph Awona.
Yeah, I mean, the November 1992 tripartite conference was called in the midst of political turmoil of the time that we had in the north and southwest regions prior to the whole thing going military. You know, in terms of school boycott and ghost towns and all of that. You know, so everything except the armed confrontation was characteristic of the period in 1992 that you referred to. You know, and in order to diffuse the tension, President Biya instructed that a tripartite conference be organized, which was convened by him but chaired by the Prime Minister of the time, Mr. Sadu Ayatu, who unfortunately just passed away a few days ago. You know, and I personally attended that tripartite conference as a part of the CPDM, the ruling party's delegation, because I was then National Secretary for Economic and Social Affairs on the Central Committee of the CPDM. You know, but the conference, one of the major outcomes of that conference was a recognition that there was a need for Cameroon to have a new constitution, and that that new constitution should be more democratic in its orientation. And during the floor debate, and it's important for your listeners to listen to hear this, during the debate on the floor in plenary session, it was remarkable that most Anglophones who went to the podium to speak, whether they were attending as members of government, because that was one party in the conference, or as members of a political party, because political parties were the second party to that conference, or as so-called independent personalities, which was the third party, now we talk about a tripartite conference, found the opportunity to raise the Anglophone problem in one aspect or the other of the problem. Okay? And we took note all of us took note of that. And so when the conference ended in the decision to establish a technical committee to go and draft a new constitution for the country, comprising 11 members, 7 Francophones and 4 Anglophones, with Professor Carlson Anyangwe, Barrister Ikontang Elad, Minister Benjamin Itoy, and myself being the 4 Anglophones. We insisted in our committee that the Anglophone problem should be addressed because it had been raised in plenary session, and that the best way to address the Anglophone problem was for us to return to a federal system of government, and that therefore the draft constitution that should come out of our committee to be tabled, to be submitted to the reconvened tripartite conference should be a federal constitution. Now that was rejected by the Francophones on the committee, and I then suggested to my 2 colleagues. I said 2 colleagues because Minister Itoy, as a member of government, although he did not say no to our initiatives, he did not commit to that either, and we could understand that, so we didn't want to involve him too much in this. But and for me, for my part, even though Professor Awona kept reminding me that Simon Munzu, you are here as representing the CPDM, you are a member of the Central Committee, secretary and all of that, I told him, yes, I am here representing the CPDM, but as far as I know, my party, the CPDM, has not ever debated this issue, has not taken a position where I can say that what I'm saying now is contrary to that position. Therefore, I argue that as a ruling party, we ought to address this matter. So in that context, in the context of that hostility we're facing in the committee, I then suggested to my colleagues, and they are alive, they can testify to that, Mr. Barrister Kontang Elad and Professor Anyangwe, that we should take this matter to the Southern Cameroonian people, if you like, to the Anglophone people. Now, our question was, who are we to convene a meeting of the Anglophones? But we found justification in the fact that the three of us were members of this constitutional drafting committee, and we believe that that gave us the authority to call a meeting of Anglophones and say, come, let's discuss, form a common position that we will take to the constitutional drafting process that the president had inaugurated. And that's what led us to convene the All Anglophone Conference. And the outcome was very encouraging because, first of all, in those 2 days, 2nd and 3rd of April 1993, we did great work. And as you can see, if you read the Boya Declaration and all of that, you saw that because the important thing was to have what I would describe a catalog of evidence, a portfolio of evidence. If we say that we are marginalized, we are dominated, we are assimilated, what are we complaining about? What are we saying? What are we talking about? So that Boya Declaration was that catalog of evidence that we needed so badly to take up. It's unfortunate that after we had done that work, and we had even drafted an alternate, as an alternate to just Wona's quote-unquote constitution, we came up with a counter proposal, which we called the draft federal constitution for the Republic of Cameroon, which exists to this day. Unfortunately, as usual, Yaoundé turned a blind eye and gave a deaf ear to all these initiatives. But the consequence, of course, was that those who got impatient with Yaoundé's response then took the matter further. We had the emergence of the SCNC and all of that. So it's a long-standing issue. I wouldn't have thought that 25, 30 years later, we'll be coming back to exactly the same point where we were in 1991, 1992, 1993.
But if we're coming back to the problem, it's simply because it hasn't been resolved or handled or taken seriously by the people in Yaoundé, of course.
Sorry, I didn't get that. I missed that. What did you say?
I'm saying that if we're still discussing this problem 25 years later or more later, it's because the people in Yaoundé didn't take the problem seriously or discuss it with the seriousness that it required. And like you clearly said, most people started off being federalists. They were all about, instituting that and being recognized within the constitution. But over time, most of the things that have happened have led more people to take hard lines. Like I could know that the old Anglophone conference brought together all these auxiliary Anglophone groups, and there was a very strong Cameroon Anglophone movement as well. They started off being very much about federalism, but then when your document or the Boya document was rejected by Professor Wona as being a copy of the Nigerian constitution, most people got very angry at that treatment, and they took a hard line of either just seceding and becoming independent. So moving on from that, I understand that President Bobia called another meeting because after he won the elections in '92, he was like he said we were going to have a national forum to discuss the constitution. So in your opinion, do you think he was serious about discussing these issues, or was it simply a ruse to diffuse the situation, the tense political atmosphere at the time?
It was a ruse. It was a ruse, as you describe it, to diffuse, or for that matter, even to deflect attention from the issues of the time. Now, by the way, it isn't that he called or set up something new. Remember that this was a projection from the tripartite conference. Now, what we had expected and what should normally have been done was that the tripartite conference, which established our technical committee for drafting the new constitution, should have been reconvened. And we, the technical committee, should have reported to the tripartite. And what we had intended to do was to submit to the reconvened tripartite 2 proposals. One was going to come up and going to go up and submit his unitary draft constitution, and we were going to go up, the 4 of us, or 3 of us, if you like, Professor Nyangwe, Barrister Ella, and I, to submit our federalist proposal, saying to the tripartite, here are 2 proposals. Proposal number 1, we are submitting to you on the basis that we, the Cameroonian people, agree to remain a unitary state. Proposal number 2, we are submitting to you in the event that the Cameroonian people, taking into account the Anglophone problem and the need to deal with it, agree that we return, as we should return, to the federal system of government. That's what we intended to. Now, the President Biya, unfortunately, deviated from all of that. He did not reconvene the tripartite. He instead decided to establish a new system, a new format, which they called, some people call it the Grand Débat, others call it the Large Débat. He encouraged Cameroonians to send in their proposals by fax in those days, or telex in those days. You know, all of this. And then he set up a larger committee of, I think, 32 people, still chaired by the same Professor Wona, including us. But the 3 of us, Anyangwe, Ellen, and I, decided to boycott that second committee, the so-called consultative committee. So we refused to attend that because we said that this was just an element of deceit. But what is more, we then went on, at least I went on with the late, God bless his soul, William Tatala Shintum, who was working in the Ministry of Telecommunications at the time, but a great activist, you know. He and I decided that it wasn't enough that the 3 of us, members of the Technical Drafting Committee, boycotted the Consultative Committee. We needed our leaders to boycott that, stop participating in it as well. Yeah. And he and I, the 2 of us, went on to talk to a number of them, including Cardinal Tumi, including Anglophone, including Pamuna, and ultimately persuaded these last 3 to agree also to pull out. And after the pull out, we drafted without false modesty. I would say I drafted and reviewed with William, and we endorsed, and then took to the statement of withdrawal. The statement of withdrawal from that consultative committee. We drafted the Cardinal Tumi's statement. We started with him, he endorsed it and used it to withdraw. We drafted that of Baujan Gudfoncha, took it to him, he reviewed it, endorsed it, and used it as his withdrawal statement, which is on record today. We drafted that of Pamuna. He reviewed it with us. He said he was going to discuss it with his sons. He went and discussed it with his sons, and ended up, they modified it, but he also withdrew. And to us, it was a significant achievement because it sent shockwaves around the country. The fact that 3 such luminaries in Anglophone leadership walked out of that actually increased the level of lack of credibility of that process. You know, so never, in spite of all those efforts, I mean, the president pushed through his reform, and which culminated in the so-called Constitution of 1996.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of activities in the early 90s, but from 1996, there was a bit of a lull in that momentum. It kind of went down from there until recently with all the lawyers going on peaceful protests that started and from crisis again. That's not to say that there weren't groups in the background that had been advocating and SCNC growing stronger and stronger in the background advocating for secession. But I am just wondering, because it's been over 60 years, and in your words, you always say, that it is not good to use the argument of force, but to use the force of argument. But now we've used the force of argument for over 60 years, and we've had no result. Now, for those who have decided that, okay, the force of argument hasn't worked, so how about we use the argument of force? Because the other one, the government still hasn't listened to us. And we can see that this is what is being it is being expressed by the Ambazonian fighters as we know them today, who are fighting to create the independent state of Ambazonia. So in your opinion, do you feel that we should keep on straddling this line of using the force of argument, which hasn't really worked for us?
No, Pamela, without any hesitation,
Mm-hmm.
I stand very much by us continuing to use the force of argument. And the reason is simple. For a start, let's not make a mistake about the era in which we are and the manner in which things have evolved. I can tell you that in 1993, when we launched the SCNC emanating from the AAC and all of that, we were an elite group examining the situation, including its legal background and so on, and making proposals. Even though AAC 1 pulled about an estimated 5,000 people attending, that was still, if you like, insignificant compared to the groundswell of our population today, around the Anglophone problem today. You understand? And that groundswell, Pamela, was not brought about by people calling themselves the Anglophone Defense Forces or the Red Tigers or the Red Dragons or whatever, or the Kadef and any of that stuff. No. When our people decided on the 9th of January 2017 to embark upon the weekly ghost towns, that decision was not, they were not doing that because the Ambazonians pushed them, right? It was an act of civil disobedience. Yeah. I personally drove from Victoria, where I live, through Mile 7, through Mile 4 and Mutengene and all the way to Buea to see for myself the level of obedience of the first ghost town on the 9th of January. And I reported on it. I submitted a kind of citizen report of what I saw, which was circulated on social media and audio. Okay, there was no war, there was no Ambazonia. When parents decided, in solidarity with teachers, that their children would not go to school, it was not Ambazonia that was pushing them to that. So our population, by the sheer weight and commitment are capable and have shown the capability of staging civil disobedience campaigns and producing results of the type that we witnessed elsewhere. The likes of Martin Luther King achieved what they achieved. It wasn't by violence. There are many examples of successful, peaceful demonstrations, and the people of Southern Cameroon are ready for that kind of demonstration and would have continued on that trajectory without bloodshed. Okay, and that's number one. Number two is that we are working in a general context of opening up. The Yaoundé regime is one of the last to opt for autocratic rule. Elsewhere around us, not in Europe or North America, around us in Africa, Pamela, there are more and more examples of African leaders listening to their people and acting in accordance with the will of the people. And I happen to be convinced, deeply convinced, that in spite of the initial resistance on the part of the Yaoundé regime, which until now do not have a culture of dealing with, negotiating with civilians, with the population, that was bound to change. The measures, the half measures that the government announced in response to the lawyers and the teachers, like saying, oh, now we have created the bilingualism and the multicultural commission. Oh yeah, now we have introduced a common law bench at the Supreme Court. Oh, now we are going to teach common law at Anglophone universities and all of that, supposedly to deal with social justice. Do you think those measures, they took them because of the Ambazonians? The measures were not sufficient? You and I can say that they were just trying to wait what? But these were in response to, so all we needed to do, and what I've been telling the Ambazonians, all that we needed to do was tap into this readiness of our population for civil disobedience campaigns, and we would have what we want without exposing our country and our population to all this bloodbath that has been going on now for more than a year. Okay?
But some would say that that's exactly what we did. And but the result of that was the military being visited, because people started off by doing ghost towns, going for peaceful protests, peaceful. But then the government sent in the military, the troops, that started raping and maiming and burning down villages. And so some people would say, okay, what else do we do? We did civil disobedience, we did peaceful protest, and then we were victimized for doing peaceful protests by the people who are supposed to protect us.
Absolutely. I agree with you that as a matter of simple observation, that is the way the government responded. But I would also draw your attention to the fact that during the civil rights movements in the United States, the federal government did not, or for that matter, even some state governments, in responding to the civil rights leaders and protesters, did not use kid gloves. They were very brutal, right? That did not diminish from non-violence as an effective way of fighting a brutal regime. Similarly, in South Africa, in the apartheid days, now the protests there, I mean, ultimately, apartheid was defeated. It wasn't in the absence of the brutality of the apartheid regime. So the response of the government, brutal as it was, it in itself does not in itself negate the potential effectiveness of peaceful protest in response to this. You know, so now what has happened? Those who now claim that in response to the president declaring war on our territory and our people, they are fighting back in self-defense, they say. Now, what has been the cost of that fighting back in self-defense? That's number one. Number two, again, let's get our facts straight in this matter. While it is true that President Biya, on returning, I think, from a trip in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan or something, he is on record of having arrived at the airport in Yaoundé. Someone put a piece of paper in his hand. He read a statement. in which he said that he had given or was giving instructions for warmongers to be dealt with, etc., etc. And certain propagandists have come to present that as a declaration of war. But if we be true to facts, before that occasion, didn't we record acts like the abduction to this day of the duo of Batibo, I think it was, a government official? Didn't we, prior to that, record the abduction of, I think it was the divisional delegate of social services in either the same Momo or Mezam, one of those two, but the facts are there, one can check them up. Didn't we, prior to that, witness or receive reports of the killing of 4 policemen and 2 gendarmes in Mamfe, in Kembo, etc.? So, besides that, it has to be acknowledged that even while we were running the SCNC and all of that, already at that time, within the SCNC, including when we had AAC2 in Bamenda, there were already people who said, this thing is enough. We can solve it only by a war of liberation. They were there in the movement already. The only thing is that since we applied the argument of, the force of argument, whenever we met and we exchanged views, we demonstrated that this was premature. How would you defend your declaration of independence? What capabilities that we have, etc., etc. We held those arguments. In those days, there was tolerance. It's not like today that once you hold a different view, you become the object of threats and so on. You know, so yeah. So this is it. And we said if what we actually wanted was the war option, we concluded that there's no room for the force of argument. That has to be the argument of force. Then in that case, my challenge to those who adopt this position is that you inform our population. Tell them that we've reached this point. Let it be endorsed by the general population. Because the importance of this is that once they endorse it, then they're ready for the consequences. First, they have to know that if we embark on war and we're going to solve this thing through war, then it won't be a war of 3 months, it won't be a war of 3 years, it could well be a war of 30 years. So everybody should be prepared that for the next how many years, your children don't go to school, don't complain, because we have all opted for that. If your homes are burned by the enemy, don't complain, because we all opted for that. If your markets are shut down permanently, don't complain, because and everybody will know we are contributing to the war effort. But what is regrettable is that the manner in which this was approached has made our population the victim of 2 extremes. On the one hand, the separatists have imposed a separatist agenda on our population. And they declare that there's a new country, they choose a name, they choose a flag, they choose an anthem, they say they have coined a new currency. They have done this and they've done that, and all of that is just dictated from you from abroad. We just hear in Cameroon that it has happened, and we're supposed to just sit down and accept that, regardless of the consequences. From the other side, a regime that is not that doesn't believe in the culture of discussing with citizens, breathing down our necks, burning our towns, subjecting our people to the service of subjecting, and we are caught in between. So, and for how long will this be? And that's why we've been, from the beginning, we said this cannot, the cost is high. And incidentally, I happen to have worked in the United Nations for several years in conflict and post-conflict crisis. So, for me, it's not It's not a matter of theory. I know. I've seen it. I've lived it. The consequences of war. So when I see people who are sitting in Oslo or Maryland or Belgium or wherever, talking about what is happening in Cameroon in terms of, oh, this is collateral damage. This is damage of war. This is the price to pay for our privilege. So yeah, that's very good as long as the life that is paying that price is not your life. You can be up there with your children and your family, enjoy yourselves. What is happening on the ground, which was only for about less than a year, over less than 2 years now. Imagine what it would be if we go into year 3, year 4, year 5, year 15.
Yeah.
That's the hard reality. And it is therefore, that it is all of this that leads some of us to believe that there's still a chance for dialogue. And what is more, Pamela, is that if you are going to engage with the international community, because don't forget that these Amazonians started by telling us that they were going to get us independent by diplomacy.
Yes.
When Mr. Julius Ayutabe was flying around, going to headquarters, to capitals, all over the place, saying that they were engaging the so-called diplomatic offensive. And they gave the impression that we were going to get independence by diplomacy. I told them as early as July 2017 in a conference in Atlanta, where I spoke on the same platform as Professor Anyangwe and Mr. Hamoni Gobga. Please don't deceive yourselves and don't deceive the Cameroonian people that you are going to give, or the southern Cameroonian people are going to give up independence by diplomacy. Because no country is going to support this cause for the simple reason that it is the international community that supervised the 1961 plebiscite. The international community that approved the result of that plebiscite.
Yes.
The international community that said, as of 1st October 1961, Southern Cameroon will become independent by joining La Republique. The international community witnessed the fact that the new nation was going to be a federal republic of 2 equal states, etc., etc. So, all that we have the international community as witnesses and even as midwives of the process. So you come to 2016, 2017, 2018, and you expect to tell the international community that all what they did there was rubbish. They should come back to treat Southern Cameroon as a trust territory and begin the process of independence of Southern Cameroon again. No, they will not do it. They abused me, they insulted me, they called me traitor, they gave me some names, they threatened me and all of that. But my challenge today is they should tell me, after almost 4 years into this process, one single country, one, that has supported the separatist cause. That's number one. No, number two, and let's put it on the other hand, the military. If you rule out dialogue and you rule out diplomacy, and you say it is the military option, okay, then please organize your military apparatus in such a way that you defeat the troops of President Biya and the government of Cameroon to the point where you force them to come and negotiate with you on your terms. But you don't even organize yourself properly for that. And you think that because you score some victories here and again, you are going to bring the government of Yaoundé to a negotiating table where you say you are imposing that we are coming to this table only to discuss separation.
Yes.
On what basis? You know, if that is what you want, then let us see how you organize it. You have a united political command. Let's see how many of them are all leaders of various different factions
Mm-hmm.
in the movement. You should have a united military command because you're all pursuing one objective.
Yes.
Is that what we see today? Why don't they have it? Because everybody wants their own army on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't seem to be the posture of a people or a movement that is going to liberate
Yes.
our territory anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is the way to go, then they should once again challenge them. Once again, they should tell our people that this is how we're going to liberate you, but it won't be for tomorrow. You'll be ready for a long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the midst of that,
Mm-hmm.
and just to wrap up on that somewhat,
Yes.
I mean, as today,
Mm-hmm.
I proceed from the position that there is no disagreement amongst Anglophones about the nature of the Anglophone problem.
Mm-hmm.
We all agree that it can be summarized in terms of the various instances of domination, marginalization, assimilation of our territory and our people over the past nearly 60 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
That problem has to be resolved. Now, how do we resolve it? How do we end that phenomenon that I just described? In my analysis, three approaches emerge.
Okay.
The first approach is that of those whom I term assimilationists.
Mm-hmm.
The people who for the past 60 years have pursued a policy of assimilation under
Yes.
the two regimes that have governed us, and who are continuing to do it today. And to them, when they succeed in assimilating us, then the Anglophone problem will be resolved because there will be no Anglophone anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. You know? And that's what they've been pursuing. Even this so-called decentralization they're talking about, and that's why I can't buy it. If you read the 2004 law on orientation of decentralization,
Mm-hmm.
and if you read the recent law that was adopted in Parliament, I think last March, on decentralization, you see that what is proposed does not allow the regions, let alone the local councils, any degree of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The elected regional councils and their president will be answerable to the appointed governor. The elected mayors and their councils will still be answerable to the appointed SDO.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in cities like Victoria, if you like, Limbe, Kumba, Bamenda, which are urban, which are city councils,
Yes.
the elected mayors of the various council areas within those conglomerates will be under the authority of an appointed government delegate. So, decentralization as currently proposed remains a tool of assimilation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other approach is that of the separatists. Separatists say, for us to end this Anglophone problem in terms of dominating us, marginalizing us, assimilating us, let us move away. Let's go. Let's become independent or regain our independence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So once they do that, then of course we are freed from this problem. Okay? Unfortunately, and this is a truth that no one even needs to point out because it's so evident, that the rest of Cameroon, the other 8 regions of Cameroon to begin with, and then you add to that, obviously, a certain percentage of Anglophones,
yes,
are not going to accept that we walk away peacefully. Therefore, we have to remain committed to a war of liberation, independence, or whatever that can take decades.
yeah.
And I don't buy that.
Yeah.
So it leaves us then with what I call, those first two are the first way and the second way. It leaves us with what I call the third way. And the third way is the federalist way. It is the federalist way. It is a way which recognizes that our Union of 1961 was entered in good faith. It was predicated on the basis that coming into the two territories coming in with their different cultures and all of that, both have to be recognized and protected and preserved. And that we actually started the nation on that basis.
Yeah.
11 years later, the rules of the game were changed. Now, taking advantage of this new context, including greater awareness of the international community, the preparedness of the international community to accompany us down that path, we should press for the third way, which is a return to the federal system. And that third way seems to me to hold the advantage, number one, that it is based on dialogue and negotiation, not the use of force, not killing more of our people, not burning more of our homes, not decimating more of our population. No, it is built on dialogue and negotiation. Number two, it would attract the support of the international community, because the international community recognizes that we originally came into this union on the basis that we would be a federation, and that we have been badly treated by a deviation from that original agreement. It is possible for the international community to exert pressure for a return to that, whereas they would not exert pressure to secure our separation.
Yeah.
So when we take into account all these things, I personally advocate a return to federation. Now the rest is a matter of how do we fine-tune it. Some people will say a federation of how many states, what are the specifics, and so on. It is precisely to work all of this out that we advocated not only the holding of a national conference on the Anglophone problem, but the fact that that national conference on Anglophone should be preceded by a meeting of Anglophones among themselves. So that together, listening to each other, giving a preference to the force of argument, we should look at all these options. Listen and say, okay, even if we cannot all agree on one, this is the dominant option. Let's take this to the national negotiation. Yeah. Okay? And hence the decision to convene the Anglophone General Conference, which unfortunately, whose fortunes have been what we know today as a result of opposition from their forces. Yeah.
So I'm just going to read out a few comments, just so that we can hear what the people are saying following the forum. So we have someone here, Ismail Sangu, who's saying federation only works if people obey laws. Do Francophones obey laws? And we have Paul Mark Percy here saying Francophones are not Biya, blame Biya and his Betty Bulu clique, and not all Francophones. So let me see, we have some more comments coming through. Someone is saying that you are a La République du Cameroon agent. So interesting one there. And so there's Simon J who's saying, but who is approving what you're saying? La République du Cameroon?
Who is what? Who is approving?
Who is approving what you're saying? Because you have presented the different options on what the federation could look like or couldn't look like. So Simon J is asking, who will approve what you're saying? La République du Cameroon?
Well, I mean, what am I should react to that, should I?
Yes.
I didn't hear the very first one, but the second one, which I said Francophones are not Biya, I agree with that person.
Yes.
And that is why I agree with those who say that this crisis is not a crisis of Anglophones versus Francophones as such. No. The sociological evidence is there that in the 60 years or almost that the union has existed, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware of instances where there has been a fight, a quarrel amongst people in a particular community just because some were Anglophone and others were Francophone. And yet, heaven knows that there have been so many opportunities this past 60 years of the two communities living together.
Yes.
In the same schools, going to the same markets, the same workplaces, the same churches, even in some places, and so on and so forth. I'm not aware that there is something Anglophone community versus Francophone community. On the contrary, the mere fact that our people who have come under pressure in the villages and towns in the north and southwest, in terms of internal displacement, some of them fled, so to speak, rather to the Francophone regions. It's clear proof of this. You don't when you're running away, go towards your enemy in search of refuge. You don't do that. So it has to be clear. This crisis is not in terms of Anglophone versus Francophone. It's a matter of governance by a regime, a ruling elite, which has decided to approach this. And in fact, it is an application. It is a specific application in the two Anglophone regions of a style of governance, which the same elite is applying throughout the country. So that's I agree with that person. Of course, I mean that I am an agent of La République. I mean that just makes me laugh. But all I can do is laugh because first of all, I've heard that so many times without ever knowing what it means to be an agent of La République. But anybody who knows that I, Simon Munzu, resigned from the Cameroon civil service, teaching from at the universities where I was in the civil service. I resigned from the Cameroon civil service in the 90s at the time when I didn't have a job. I wasn't going to something else, but just because I disagreed with the ruling CPDM, of which I was a member and an official, because of the Anglophone. That's what took me out of the country. And when I resigned, I spent 1 full year without a job. And the Cameroon Post, one of the Cameroon Post of that period, and those who want to research can go and see, they carry the story of my resignation. And I spent a whole year without a job, and ultimately got an opportunity to join the United Nations as a volunteer. I've heard it said that, it's the President Biya who found me a job at the UN. And those who know anything know that you don't need anybody to support you to be recruited as a volunteer in the United Nations. So I started at the humble position of a volunteer, and by God's grace, I rose through the ranks to become Assistant Secretary General. I'm proud of that. But for anybody to feel that, as long as you don't agree with them, you are automatically the so-called agent of La République. You're automatically a traitor. You're automatically a sellout. You're automatically a collaborator. That's complete nonsense. If that's the kind of intolerant society in which we are going to live, then I fear for even that country who are promising us, it is going to be characterized by this kind of intolerance. And as for who's approving what I'm saying, at this point, Pamela, what I'm doing is joining the discussion.
Yes.
As you yourself said in the introduction, on your platform, you offer the opportunity for separatists to come and talk, people to come and talk, and so on. And you have given me the opportunity to explain my own thoughts and my own sentiments and my own feeling on this. Is the concern of finding a solution to the problem. Now, those who listen to me will listen to me. Some will accept what I'm saying and agree with it. Others would reject it, and they disagree with me and reject it. That's normal. That's only fair. However, there is obviously going to come a day, and it may not be the distant future, when there will be a national dialogue on the Anglophone problem. There will be. And on that day, the various arguments will be stated by the various, from the various positions. Because incidentally, on that day, or on that occasion, it is arguments, not force, that will be applied in the context of a dialogue, and the argument will be determined not by the number of likes or views that you attract on social media, but on the cogency of your argument in a national dialogue on the Anglophone problem.
Okay. Let's get most of the viewers here, because they have quite a lot of comments that they want you to see. But unfortunately, people, for some reason, I can't bring them onto the screen. I can see them on the Facebook page, but on the live app, it's not coming up to allow me to put it on the screen. So I will have to read them out. So I have a comment here from Padi Asanga, who says the silent majority approves all what Dr. Simon Munzu is saying. And I have a question from Ismail here, who's asking, Ismail Sangu. So he's asking you, Dr. Munzu, is BR stronger than all francophones? And he's also reiterating the fact that if you're saying that federation will come from A to D, how is that going to happen when we've been having discussions with them since 1961 and we've not had that response yet?
Well, I mean, on this particular, by the way, Padi Asanga, whom I know very well, Padi, thank you very much. For the last question.
From Ismail Sangu.
Okay, Ismail Sangu, who, yeah, you see, I don't share the pessimism of those who keep saying, oh, they haven't listened to you this how many decades, so what's going to happen now? Mr. Bia is not even listening, and so on and so forth. I think that people don't seem to want to recognize that things are changing, things are evolving in the right direction. So I am not despondent about the slow rate at which things are going, but things are going. Let's just wait and see what the next few weeks and months will be.
Okay. So I have another comment here from Jonathan Tingume. So he says, Dr. Munzu says the UN and its international partners were witness to the union and independence of West Cameroon. Can he tell us where the union document was deposited? We need proof of the union.
Yes, you see, that I can understand where that questioner or that commentator is coming from. You know, a lot of false propaganda has been put out there by those who say that there is no union treaty. Some say that they've gone to New York and they've searched, they haven't found any such treaty, and they even formulated the so-called theory of Njumba marriage. No, all that is nonsense. My answer to that compatriot begins by reminding him and all your viewers that in the final analysis, Cameroon was not created by God. There is no territory on earth that God created and named Cameroon. And there are no people on earth whom God created and named Cameroonians. If you read your history, you will know that starting even with the name of our country, the name of our country is foreign derived. It is Portuguese or bronze. Not all that in primary and secondary school. So hopefully your caller has heard about that. Then you come to the limitation of our boundaries, from how much territory was given to Germany in 1884 at the Berlin Conference. to how much territory was given, of how much of that territory after Germany lost the war was given to France, and how much of it to Great Britain in the Treaty of Versailles 1922, to the fact that Great Britain decided for its own administrative convenience to further divide that its own portion into British Northern Cameroons and British Southern Cameroons. All this was decided by colonial powers, not Cameroonians.
Yeah.
Okay? If I am particularly proud of reunification, it is precisely because that is the one aspect of the existence of our country that you can say was decided by Cameroonians. Because it is British Southern Cameroonians who voted in the majority in 1961 to join the Republic and constitute this entity. So that is the one thing. Although the experiment may have gone sour, but that is the one thing that you can say concerning Cameroon that was decided by Cameroonians. The rest has been an imposition from colonialists, okay? And it is within that framework that the same colonialists decided that we were limited to achieving independence by joining the Republic of Nigeria. And that was the object of the plebiscite of 11 February 1961. Our people went to the polls. If they had decided on that 11th of February 1961 to join Nigeria, in the same manner that their brothers and sisters of British Northern Cameroons did, Pamela, we would have been in Nigeria today, right? Yes, we would have been in Nigeria. The Republic would not have come to pull us out of Nigeria and say, come here, you are Cameroon. No, just as they did not do with Northern Cameroons. So the operative factor for our being in union with La Republique was the choice made by our people on the 11th of February 1961.
Okay, so let me bring you back.
Sorry, Pam. I'm sorry about this, but this is important because I keep hearing that thing from certain people all the time. So this is just a development, but let me get to the key point. Okay. Now, having voted, what was the next step? The next step was that the United Nations sat on the 21st of April. The General Assembly met on the 21st of April, 1961. Yeah. Examined, and I can, the person who has asked that question, he and his people keep referring to General Assembly Resolution 1608. Indeed, of 21st April 1961. In that resolution, the General Assembly of the United Nations clearly stated that they have examined the report of the UN Plebiscite Commissioner, that they have endorsed it, that they congratulate the Commissioner and his staff. The General Assembly explicitly stated that the population of Southern Cameroon voted freely and in knowledge of what their destiny was going to be, etc., etc. And that in the light of all of this, the General Assembly asked the government of British Southern Cameroons, the government of La Republique, and the government of the United Kingdom to go and continue their negotiations in such a way that they conclude those negotiations in time for the trusteeship agreement to be ended on the 1st of October 1961. And these parties went ahead and did that, culminating in the federal constitution that came into force on the 1st of October 1961. What more do they want? They will tell you that the Constitution was promulgated on the 1st of September 1961 by President Ahidjo before ratification. What they don't tell you, and this is where all these lies and innuendos wouldn't get us anywhere. What they don't tell you is that the parties had agreed that each territory would endorse and promulgate what they had agreed on to be the federal constitution. Ahidjo in East Cameroon, they did it. In West Cameroon, the records are there, the official records are there. There was a debate on constitution on the 4th of September 1961 in Buea, followed by another one on the 18th of September by our own Southern Cameroon House of Assembly, at the end of which the House of Assembly adopted that constitution. Now, you've got to understand, Pamela, that on the 1st of October, the two territories are going to come together on the basis of a new constitution, the federal constitution of 1st October 1961. Now, in order that the constitution would come into force on that day, what the parties had agreed upon had to be ratified by their respective assemblies, which they did. But these people who are trying to distort history will tell you that there is no record of endorsement and all of that. Assuming even that the West Cameroon House of Assembly failed to perform its own role by endorsing that constitution, which it did not, it did. The records are there. But supposing that it did not, is that ground for their descendants of today to opt out of the union because their forebears failed to do what they're supposed to do? Number one, and just to end on that, because this is another thing they can't keep bringing up. Just to end on that, Pamela, the UN Charter provides in Article 102. It is so short, Pamela, that just permit me to read it because our friends keep coming back to this 102 on the marriage theory. This is what Article 102 of the UN Charter says. It says, every treaty, paragraph 1 says, every treaty and every international agreement entered into by any member of the United Nations after the present charter comes into force shall, as soon as possible, be registered with the Secretariat and published by it. So that's be registered by the Secretariat of the UN and published by the Secretariat. You understand? Now, then paragraph 2 says, no party to any such treaty or international agreement which has not been registered in accordance with paragraph 1 that I just read may be invoked. Invoke that treaty or agreement before any organ of the UN. It's important. Paragraph 1 says that such a treaty or agreement has to be registered and published. Paragraph 2 says that if it is not registered and published, no party to that agreement or treaty can invoke it before an organ of the UN. Now, our folks tell us that they have been to New York, they've searched all the archives, they didn't see any registered agreement. And my answer to them is number one, the agreement, the federal constitution that came into force on the 1st of October 1961 as the foundation of the union was of course notified to the UN when the UN acknowledged that a new member called the Federal Republic of Cameroon had replaced the Republic of Cameroon. You understand? Number two, even assuming that there was an agreement that had not been registered, what Article 102, paragraph 2 does is not to say that that agreement is null and void between the parties, but rather that none of the parties can invoke that agreement before an organ of the UN. In the context of this present crisis, has La Republique invoked any agreement before the UN? Is La Republique invoking any agreement before any organ of the UN? Are we, 50,000 Cameroons, especially since we deny the existence of the agreement, are we invoking any agreement before any organ of the UN? In other words, where does 102 paragraph 2 apply? It does not. So they should stop all this nonsense. And if they feel that they have those arguments, that's why the place to advance them will be to, if it's a national dialogue, or if you want to go to the United Nations Assembly, or you want to go to the International Court of Justice and all of that, take the arguments there. Let us see how they will decide in your favor instead of attacking each other. No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay, so I'll go back to more of the comments. So just coming back to that federation. So I had a comment here from a gentleman who was asking about what federation will look like. You've given different scenarios on what that could possibly be, but there are some people who are kind of confused. They're saying, is it going to be 2 states in this federation, as in the Anglophone zone and the Francophone region? Because Francophones on their side too will be saying, okay, yeah, we're also suffering, just like Anglophones, we're also going through a hard time. So how will this federation look like? Is it going to be 2 states, 5 states, 7 states? Will it be across multi-ethnic lines? Will it be across languages? How does, in your opinion, as a way of solution, because we're talking about the federation that was proposed in the 60s, but things have evolved since then. And today everybody's claiming the North is as different from the South. And Northerners would think, okay, they would have a likely Nigerian scenario where there's rotation from the North to the South. So everyone else has an idea of how this federation should work. So how do you think we can resolve that?
I'm glad you've asked that question, Pam. I've always said that I usually prefer, in examining any issue, I prefer to do the analysis. In other words, it's like a doctor. You first examine the patient. You do your diagnosis, prescribing a remedy. You don't come up with a remedy and then decide what ailment you are treating. So on this particular question, it has come up over and over again. My answer is this. If we take as a starting point the fact that in 1961, the Cameroon we know of today was born from the coming together of 2 territories. And that if we are to return to a federal system which is intended to preserve the specificities of each of those 2 territories, right? Then, of course, having done that analysis and that diagnosis, the remedy you apply, the drug you prescribe, would be a return to a 2-state federation. You understand? But there, you are limiting yourself to just the 2 colonial heritages. Okay? But supposing, as you yourself just pointed out now, supposing you were to proceed on the basis that, yes, in this past 60 years, things have, the way the government has run, has been administered and all of that, there is a greater yearning for autonomy, not only among Anglophones, but also Francophones. And that therefore, we should respond to the yearning for autonomy of all the regions. If that is what you set out to cure or to address, then of course the leaning, the tendency will be towards establishing a federation of 10 states. Okay? And now, who is to tell, as you hinted, who is to tell our compatriots in other parts of Cameroon who also have problems, who also feel that they have problems? Who are we to tell them that they don't have, and therefore they should not put those problems to be addressed in the national forum? We have been complaining that we've been saying for around 60 years, we have a problem, and we have a problem. And the regimes, successive regimes in Yaoundé keep acting as if to say, you have no problem, you have no problem, you have no problem. So is it we who have had that experience who should stand in the way of other Cameroonians in other parts of the country who say they too have a problem. And we're the first to tell them, you don't have a problem, leave us alone. We have to solve only the Anglophone problem. No. If it comes to that, it may well be that the three northern regions would say that if you are returning to a federation that allows North and Southwest to be together as one state, then we, the three northern regions, also want to be together as one state. We'll listen to them. They're entitled to make that. Perhaps the center, the south, and the east would make the same case. Perhaps the littoral and the west would make the same case. So in a negotiation or a dialogue, you listen to people and each person puts their point of view. And let me just finish on that, conclude on that one by saying that, drawing attention to the fact that, you see, again, we Anglophones may tend to exaggerate and act as if we are the only ones who suffer some of this phenomenon of marginalization, domination, and so on. Do you know that when, let us say, a police official, a judicial official, an education official is posted to the northern and southwest, who is francophone, that person stands out immediately as coming from somewhere because he's francophone, right?
Yeah.
And we look around and we say that all these our services are headed by francophones, therefore we're dominated. But it may well also be that you go to the northern regions and you find also that in the northern regions, many of the officials who are working there are not from those regions. Okay? It may not immediately strike them as odd because those people who come and work there, they work in French, applying the French system of administration which they're used to. But when they sit down and analyze the situation, they'll find that, wow, all these people here are dominantly from the south. Okay? So let us, if as Cameroonians want to address these issues, we have to make allowance for other people to come up with their own grievances and complaints as well, and we address them as a nation.
Yeah, right. So there are lots of comments coming out, Dr. Munzu, and I want us to get going and treat a lot of the things. So I have a comment from a gentleman here by name of Abraham Johnson Bate, and he says there is a horrible scenario with Anglophones which make our political deliberations frightfully and worse than that of the present Bias government. So the Southwest region people since 1965 rejected any political fusion with the Northwest region people. Today, a sizable number have still made their voices heard on the non-approval to an Amazonian country, but a few of you self-appointed separatists and federalists sit tight to your ideals to the utter disdain of the agitating group. The earlier we hold for a rethink, review, and reshape of all popular propositions, the better for us all. What do you think about that?
Well, excuse me, I agree entirely with the final proposition of that caller or comment of viewer. In other words, the key to this thing lies in us meeting to talk, meeting to dialogue, meeting to examine the various propositions. Simon Munzu is not coming up with a prescription which says that it has to be this form of federation or that form of federation. I believe that we need to sit and listen to people. Now, this particular issue of Northwest, Southwest, it's a real one. It's a real one. Again, those who believe that we should brush things, sweep things under the carpet, who are uncomfortable with truth, will tell you when you say there's a problem, that yes, you see, once again, you are proving that you are an agent of La République because you are trying to sow a dissension between North and Southwest. I personally, if I may say so, most of my friends who I interact on a daily basis, professionally and socially and otherwise, are those whom you say would call Northwesterners. And anybody who knows me knows that from time immemorial. But it is also historically true that the manner in which the government was managed in the days of southern Cameroons from 1959 to 1961, that interval of just 2 years, when Dr. Foncha was Prime Minister in British Southern Cameroon. And from 1961 to 1972, when the Federation was abolished, in other words, in a space of, if my math is correct, about 13 years, right? The way the government was run in what we call today North and Southwest in those 13 years was such that many of what we call Southwesterners today are apprehensive that if we were to have that again, they will be dominated, they will be marginalized, they will be assimilated by the Northwest. Okay? So those fears, those apprehensions are voiced, they are expressed. Do we just dismiss them out of hand? Do we, in a meeting, allow that they be vented so that we all see whether they are genuine or not, and if so, to what degree, and if they are, what should be done about it? We have to be truthful to ourselves, and so it is a real problem. But as I say, it's a problem, the solution to which we can find only through a collective discussion and dialogue. Now, let me tell you that to address that, I give you one scenario. Supposing, in fact, in response to just what you're saying there, or just what this caller or this commentator has raised, you were then to say, okay, listen, if that's the way the Southwesterners have these apprehensions, then yes, let us have a two-state federation which reflects the Anglophone-Francophone dichotomy. But then let us, inside each of those federated states, have a regional autonomy. You understand? So you have the autonomous region of the Southwest, in the federated state of whatever we want to call it, Anglophone Cameroon, or, you know. You have the autonomous region of the Northwest in the federated state of Anglophone Cameroon, and then you will have autonomous region of the Adamawa, of the North, of etc. Each of the 8 other regions in the federated state of East Cameroon, as this we call. This is in terms of constitutional tooling and engineering. This is not impossible. Or you say you don't want it that way, you should therefore have, as I said earlier, autonomous regions. So you have a federation of 10 states or 10 regions. So these are various things that we cannot, at this point, any one of us just sit down and say, this is what it has to be. I have said so, and that's it. No. The challenge is for us to recognize that these are real issues, and that we have to be open enough, frank enough to admit that they exist, and be prepared to sit down together, examine them, and find a solution which satisfies, by and large, everybody and holds our nation together while making sure that we respond to the concerns of various components of that nation.
So talking of dialogues, Dr. Munzu, are there any talks scheduled by the Cameroon government taking place anytime soon to address this particular problem and bring together all the actors to create or bring about the solution that we seek?
Well, I mean, I am not a member of the Cameroon government, so my answer may be as good as that of your correspondent. But let me say this, and I do have my ear to the ground in some respects. Let me say this, that the Cameroon government cannot fail to be sensitive, so it cannot be insensitive to the various pressures that in these past few weeks and months we have seen being mounted by the international community in terms of advocating and pressing for the holding of a national dialogue without preconditions. That has been said over and over again. And I have reason to believe that the government is beginning to listen better to that now than they were inclined to do at the beginning of this crisis. I am not in a position to be more categorical than that, but I can also say that I've had my ears on the ground both inside and outside the country. And I have reason to believe that we will be drifting in that direction. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just go back to some of the comments here to what you just said about what you think a likely federation should look like given the different thoughts on the ground. So I have Paul Malpercy here who's saying 10 states outright. We've got Peter's Echo who's saying the two, as in two autonomous region and the 10 states is the best option. I have Vistorine's Count Color who's saying no federation with La République du Cameroun again. Tell us what happened in 1961. And Paul Malpercy still goes bicultural federation wouldn't work because it's two states in disguise. And I've got Chuck here who's saying 10-state federation. And we've still got Ismail Sangdu again coming for you, Doc. And he's saying Dr. Munzu has never complained about Bamileke taking on the Southwest. And
that one makes me laugh. Anyway, please go ahead.
I've got Armstrong Yunga Fombang who's saying no amount of international pressure can move Bia. And we've got Will B who's saying why are they listening now? Because of the fact that we have taken matters into our hands to force them to get to the dialogue table. And then we've got Vistorine again saying rubbish. Which nation should we hold together? Agent of La République du Cameroun. So you've got an array of comments here. So who hired Ambazonia to talk for us? Is Chuck talking to Vistorine? So I'll just look for specific questions that are aimed at yourself, Dr. Munzo. So I've got Armstrong Yunga Fombang here who's saying that Francophones have declared and still emphasize that an Anglophone will never be president. 1992 is there to assert this. So having said that, we'll go to a round of rapid fire questions. And you don't have to think too quickly, Doc, to respond to this one. We just want you to give us very quick responses. So just give you the options so that you can choose from one.
All right.
So, did Ni John Frundi win the 1992 presidential elections? Yes or no?
Is that a trap?
No, it's not a trap. In your opinion, did Ni John Frundi win the 1992 presidential?
I think that was generally known at the time. Ni John Frundi won the election, but it was stolen.
Okay. So if you were to recommend a book for Anglophones to read to understand the complexity of this crisis, which one will it be?
Incidentally, that book has not been written yet. Maybe someone should start writing it. Because unfortunately, there is so much false and fake propaganda and poor analysis out there that, quite frankly, as of now, there isn't a single book that I would recommend. But I think someone should consider writing such a book.
Great idea. So people, you get the button. So Amadou Ahidjo or Paul Biya, who was the best president?
Well, best of two. You mean the better president?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, it's difficult to say because each one of them approached their presidency as per their own aspirations. I think that both of them have tended to run the presidency as if it was meant to satisfy or to be at the service, as if the nation was to be at the service of the president rather than the president being at the service of the nation. So I can't choose between the two of them. They have the same style and the same approach.
You're defeating the purpose of this exercise. You're supposed to not think too much and just give us rapid fire answers. So how many states should Cameroon's federation have?
Pardon?
How many states should Cameroon federation have?
2 states and 10 autonomous regions within the 2 states.
Okay, Percy. So there you had your answer. Percy thought that that was quite complex, but poor Percy, that was your response. So should the Anglophone region become one or separated into 2 regions as currently in a federation?
In a federation, it should be separated to avoid more sense, a greater sense of, okay, so I should not explain. Go ahead. All right. Should be separated.
Yeah. Okay. Achille Bembe or Francis Nyamjo?
Francis Nyamjo.
More doctors or more lawyers?
More of both.
Okay, so I'll go to more questions. I was receiving a call here, but for some reason it got disconnected. Um, and let me see what more questions we've got coming in. We've got quite a lot. So we've got Ismail Sangu who is saying in GBHS Bamenda, Kambe, and the University of Yaoundé, there were no problems amongst all. Why all these? We completed academically. Very sad to hear this from Dr. Munzu. I'm not sure to what that is referring to.
Neither am I.
The historians is saying, if you write such a book, I will not read it. And I've got Shete Kingsley who's saying both Biya and Ahijo are diabolical, neither of them. And then Delhi Singer Phillips is saying that Wiba has written about this movement. And we've also got Abraham Johnson Bate who's saying, Dr. Munzo, you're such an important personality. I won't love you to sugarcoat the great warrior of the Southwest people. Secondly, Sir, Africa is looking forward to a political union for our futuristic survival. Therefore, our existing 10 states in a Republic of Cameroon may just serve Africa better in a 10-state federation going forward. Africa cannot afford to do a lining of a bright future using foreign languages. Okay. So we've got Bantus and Bazenu saying WHO are those, who are those making the international community to pressurize Cameroon? The answer is separatists. Federalists should not take work of separatists to push their fake agenda. And I have a question here from Myron Peterson, who is asking you, Dr. Munzer, do you endorse the Swiss talks?
Yes, I endorse the Swiss process because it is intended to lay the ground for having a comprehensive national dialogue on the Anglophone problem.
Okay. So more coming on here. We've got Paul, who is saying that Pafuncha and his KNDP practiced parasitic politics and kept all power for all 11 years, perhaps trying to insinuate or to attribute it to the fact that Anglophone leadership is not maybe all the solution. So yeah, we've got Yingme Julia saying Africa's education system is a scam. While other races are working towards sustainability, we are killing ourselves, such a disgrace. And we've got Shete Kingsley Newu who is saying, do you think it is time for children to unconditionally return to school?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think it is time for children to return to school, but I don't think that can be unconditionally, because we need to create conditions for children to return to school. So I would endorse the general call for return to school, but I also believe that we cannot just open schools on a Monday morning and say children go back if the security environment remains the way it is now.
Okay. So I have a caller here from Germany. And caller, can you please identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Padia Sanga and I'm calling from Cameroon.
Welcome to the show, Padia Sanga. What question do you have for Dr. Munzo?
Yes, I have a question for Dr. Munzo. And what my first question is this. How today what we can afford instruction for dialogue today for any eventual dialogue and suppose the fact that all people are not Africa and certain people run to around very when something that I have my opinion about what's happening in South Africa. And we are doing that. And the second question is
Mm-hmm.
Why the Cameroon government is going to talk to people who are actually abroad instead of engaging those who are abroad, the boys who are back abroad, the women who are abroad, the married, the parents, and the children who are not going to school, and they are running to come to their who actually are part of the family. Why would that happen?
All right, Paji. Let me make sure that Dr. Munzo has gotten this. So, Dr. Munzo, did you hear his question?
Yes, please. Yes. I didn't hear anything before. So can you relay that to me, please? I did not hear him.
So his first question, yeah, his first. Sorry, I'm going to put this on. He's on speakerphone, so that's actually. So we've had Padilla Sanga who was calling from. I think he's calling from Germany. And so his first question was to the fact that how prepared are Anglophones actually to sit down and have a dialogue? Because we have different groups and we haven't all agreed on the agenda. So how prepared are we? That was his first question. And so he said, secondly, why is the government agreeing to have these Swiss discussions with people who are mostly in the diaspora and they're not engaging with the boys and the amber fighters who've got the guns, or the mothers back at home who've lost their children or their husbands, or family members who've lost other family members in this fighting? Why would they decide to come and speak to those in the diaspora who are actually part of the problem and not part of the solution?
I see. Okay, thank you. In terms of Anglophones being prepared to sit down and have a dialogue, I mean, my belief is that yes, they are. If Anglophones are invited to sit and have a dialogue, they will come. And Anglophones have been clamoring, have been calling for dialogue, both from within and from without the country. The question has been who should convene them to that dialogue. And when you talk about Anglophones, you're not going to have a dialogue with I don't know how many million Anglophones we are. So the challenge for someone organizing the dialogue would be how to decide the representative sample of Anglophones to sit down and dialogue. So those are practical issues to address. But otherwise, yes, if you invite Anglophones to a dialogue, they would come. They're even asking for it. With respect to the Swiss process, now I cannot claim to understand the nitty-gritty of the Swiss process and how they intend to proceed. So I can't speak to that in any authoritative manner. What I know, though, is that any serious dialogue or negotiation to address the Anglophone problem would need to involve the participation of all the stakeholders. And among the stakeholders, there are Cameroonians in the diaspora, especially, if you like, those who prefer the separatist approach. They are a critical component of our society, and they should be part of the dialogue. Now, then you have Cameroonians inside Cameroon, some of whom, I mean, each of whom, if you like, belongs to one of those three approaches that I mentioned. You have those who are prepared for decentralization, which is assimilation, those who are for separation, and those who are for federalism. So the important thing is to bring all the stakeholders on board. Now, with the Swiss process, the way I understand it, in the first instance, the first step, the first track, the first stage is for them to facilitate the eventual participation of Cameroonians in the diaspora. Now, how exactly do they intend to do that? How do they propose to proceed? I can't claim to know. But what we read initially, for instance, was that they invited a number of quote-unquote separatist leaders to Geneva. Some came, others did not. And so it's a matter of trying to see that more rather than fewer get on board this dialogue process. But that doesn't mean to say that they are excluding or they're leaving out Southern Cameroonians in Southern Cameroon.
Okay. So I have another question, which is saying, Cho Ayaba spoke to you or on some level, or maybe in the press, and he said something that Amba people now have guns. So what do you have to say to that?
No, I mean, Cho Ayaba, whom I have not had any direct interaction with, neither by telephone nor by writing or any other means. I have simply not been in touch with him, although I've been in touch with a number of quote-unquote separatist or liberation movement leaders and so on. But I saw like everybody else, I think about a year or two ago, like everybody else, I saw the post on his Facebook page where he was announcing to me that he now has guns. I'm not sure what that was meant to be, but that was the only communication. I don't know whether it was put on for a joke or for real, but that's it. Just as I'm not sure those who pasted those who posted pictures of me with a cross on my forehead and blood stains, figurative blood stains in my eyes and all of that. I don't know what that was meant to do or to produce, but I happen to believe that we have a serious problem in our country that we need to resolve it. And I make my contribution through advancing arguments, proposals, and the reasons for those proposals. I don't purport to speak dismissively of anyone, and that is why I have never, in all of this, I have never attacked anybody. I have never dismissed any point of view. I have never condemned anybody. I advance my own proposal, I advance my own argument. If people who are not tolerant enough feel like just for putting up my own argument, just for defending my own position, I should be threatened or killed and all of that, then so be it. But I find that
I'll ask you two quick questions before we go to the close. So if Ambazonia is given independence today, will you accept it, Dr. Munzu? That's a question from Ombel Jang.
If Ambazonia gets independence?
Yeah, Ombel Jang is asking you, if Ambazonia is given independence today, will you accept it?
Of course I will accept it. I'm not against independence. I'm against independence at the cost that the Ambazonians today want us to pay for it. But if this evening the Ambazonians were to bring us independence, I would accept it. Why not? We should have gotten independence standalone in 1961. We should have, but we did not. However, things have moved from 1961 to now, which have complicated matters, and that is why it's not just a straightforward independence or no independence. They take into account the cost and other things.
Yeah, I have a question here from Ross Jukes. Why was there a Fumban conference if we were united in 1961 as purported by you?
Again, the questioner is, I thank him or her for asking that question, because I would encourage our young people to really read our history. They should not allow themselves to be bamboozled by people who are giving them half-truths and all of that. Because if that listener pays attention, 1961, when the United Nations General Assembly voted or decided in Resolution 1608 that the trusteeship agreement with the United Kingdom would end on the 1st of October 1961, the day on which the union between the two Cameroons would take place. It also asked them, because as of that day, the negotiations and the discussion as to how to give effect to the decision of 1st of October 1961 should proceed had not been concluded. And so the General Assembly asked the parties to go and immediately engage their further discussions, but to make sure that they conclude them not later than the 1st of October 1961. And so immediately after that, the 21st of April 1961, the parties met in Buea in May of that same year.
Yeah.
They met in Bamenda. Then they met in Fumban in July. They met in Yaoundé in August, and they met in Buea. So it should not be put as if there's any incompatibility between the resolution 1608 and the holding of the Fumban conference.
So I'll read two more comments. Yeah. So I'll read two more comments and then we can move on to close and encourage our viewers to continue discussions in the comment section. Otherwise, we can discuss this for as long as possible. So Dr. Munzu, I have a comment here from a gentleman by name of Nyingme Julius. He's saying that the rhetoric that peace can be achieved through war is false. Truth to which the beneficiaries of war lean on to feed themselves at the expense of the vulnerable. Real peace lovers realize inasmuch everyone has a gun, everyone can shoot, but the bullet never ends up in the head of the gun manufacturer. We could shoot forever and ever. Guns will never create peace, and the absence of shooting does not mean the presence of peace. So he's saying at this rate, when Africans are still stupid enough to think that peace is achieved through war, when we are ill-equipped to escape a single cyclone or fight an epidemic outbreak, when our history and cultures are being wiped off by ourselves, when our children cannot be fed and educated properly, when the list of priorities for survival is so high and all we can invest our time and energy in is war, how shameful, how stupid, the education of Africa. So that was from Nyingme Julius. And so we have a comment here from Manga Arthur. Dialogue between who and who? Justice before any dialogue. We can't keep people for free. And I saw another comment of someone here talking about the regions, how the regions were divided before Niger came into part. So yeah, I have Paul McPersey here who's saying the Bamenda and Cameroon provinces were created in 1949 by the UK, an administrative authority of the UN trusteeship, and was later joined together in 1954 as Southern Cameroons, and Ayijo restored them as Northwest and Southwest provinces in 1972. I don't know, can you can you give us the veracity of that statement, Dr. Munzu?
Yeah, that last statement, yes, of course, it is true. Historically, it is true. Because in the British, having divided their territory into Northern Cameroon and Southern Cameroon, subsequently created two provinces. In fact, they called what we call the Northwest today, they call the Bamenda province.
Yes.
And what we call the Southwest today, they call, curiously enough, they call Cameroon's province. You know,
wow.
so,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and then when all of that was as part of the regional government of Eastern Nigeria, through which we were administered. But when they decided in 1953, 1954, give quasi, as they call it, quasi-regional status to that territory, then they called it the British Southern Cameroon. So that person is correct. Now, when the person who says that talks about justice before any dialogue, again, I hear that kind of statement, and it makes me really wonder why we want to split hair, you know, because I mean, who is to say that dialogue is not to lead to justice? Is it justice before dialogue? What does that mean? Precisely because the situation is one of injustice, you have grievances, you have the lack of peace, you have lack of. That is why you need to sit down and talk. Yeah. And let those who say that there is no justice impress upon those who are supposed to address the situation. For us to address the situation, you must ensure that we have justice here. But that comes from dialogue, Pamela, doesn't it? So when you hear a statement like justice before dialogue, and I hear a lot of that from my compatriots, I just say that. And then as to the first comment, Julius, I agree, it was a long one, very, very long one, but I agree entirely with the spirit and content of that write-up. It was in fact a write-up. And that's why, I mean, violence is not the solution. War is not the solution. That is my conviction, but maybe that's because I am being a pacifist, you know. Otherwise, all you say about, for example, I have guns. Everybody can have guns. If we decide that this is going to be fought by guns, federalists can own guns. Federalists can set up their own militia. Federalists can settle their
So
own.
I'm going to.
We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. We need to find a peaceful solution to these problems, not threatening people with guns. Yeah.
Certainly. So a last comment question from Armstrong Yongwa Fombang. If a federation tailored like decentralization that will never be implemented is given to Southern Cameroons, will Dr. Munzu accept?
No, of course not. Anything that will not be implemented, Dr. Munzu will not accept. That's obvious. Because he will not get us out of the problem. We want to get out of the problem.
So that's yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Munzu, for joining us. We've had this discussion at length. We could go on throughout the night, but all good things must come to an end. Thank you so very much to our viewers for sticking with us, giving our late start and our technical issues. You always stay with us. You always support us. We appreciate that. We enjoy the fact that you're part of this community, and we are very grateful. So we are all appreciative that Dr. Simon Munzu could spend his Sunday afternoon with us, given that he's a very busy individual. And for our caller who called in from Germany, we also thank you for calling in. We appreciate your comments. So today was not only a day to discuss why federalism should be considered as a solution, but also an opportunity for some of us to get a history lesson. So you've heard from Dr. Munzu himself, who has been a key architect and activist fighting for the representation of the rights of Anglophones to be duly reflected within the Cameroon Constitution, fighting for Anglophone autonomy through peaceful means. So Dr. Munzu, before I forget, what is your philosophy on life so that we can leave our viewers with that?
Oh, my philosophy in life, my guiding principle in life is to just do what your conscience tells you you should do, and do it for the benefit of other people, and keep smiling as you do it.
Okay, thank you for that last wise piece of wisdom before we go. So to our wonderful audience, once again, thank you for staying with us and continue discussions in the comment section. Once again, thank you, Dr. Munzu, for joining us. We're extremely grateful. And to everyone, do have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you at our next date with a star. Goodbye.
Goodbye.